When people talk about debt, they usually talk about numbers. I have never thought the numbers were the whole story. The real damage of debt begins long before a spreadsheet captures it. Debt steals peace before it steals money. It steals sleep before it steals net worth. It steals options before it steals years. And by the time most people finally decide they have had enough, the problem is no longer simply the interest rate or the monthly payment. The deeper problem is that debt has trained them to live reactively. It has taught them to begin each month behind. It has taught them that future income already belongs to the past. It has taught them to mistake survival for progress. I dislike that arrangement. I dislike it not because I think debt is always immoral. I do not believe in childish absolutes. Some debt can be used intelligently. Some debt can buy productive capacity. Some debt can be attached to an appreciating asset under sensible terms. But consumer debt, revolving balances, personal lines used to fund ordinary life, car obligations carried too carelessly, all of that creates a kind of quiet financial suffocation that destroys more than money. It destroys confidence, it destroys flexibility, it destroys the part of the mind that can think long term. That is why I have always believed that getting out of debt is not merely a mathematical cleanup. It is one of the most important psychological restructurings a person can perform on his life. Most people do not begin that restructuring because they are inspired. They begin because they are tired of the payment, tired of seeing the statement, tired of that small, ugly reminder each month that someone else has a first claim on money they have not yet earned, tired of watching goals stay delayed because the past keeps billing the future. Beneath all the template language and tutorial scaffolding in the source file was a very real emotional truth. People want to be debt-free because they want peace, they want to breathe, they want the right to look ahead without immediately seeing an invoice, Fay file site, Fay turn 24, file 0, Fay. I understand that impulse very well. If I were speaking plainly about debt, I would begin exactly there. Not with formulas, not with a template, not with debt snowballs or avalanches. I would begin with motive. Why do you want this over? You had better know. Because paying off debt is simple in concept and emotionally difficult in practice. If you do not know your why, then the first dinner invitation, the first sale, the first small bonus, the first exhausting week, the first moment you decide you deserve a break, the first time life asks you to choose between temporary comfort and long-term freedom, that is when the plan begins to die. A weak reason cannot survive a strong temptation, so I would want a person to sit quietly and answer that question with honesty. Why must this debt end? For some people, the answer is peace of mind. For others, it is the dream of home ownership. For others, it is marriage, children, travel, entrepreneurship, flexibility, or simply the desire to stop being financially humiliated every month by obligations they no longer respect. The specific answer matters less than its emotional force. It must be strong enough to keep working when enthusiasm disappears. Because enthusiasm always disappears. That is one of the first truths people must learn about money. Motivation is not reliable, it is useful in the opening scene, and mostly absent in the middle. So if you are serious about getting out of debt, you need something sturdier than inspiration. You need motive, structure, and repetition. I would organize the whole journey around 3 words. See, sequence, sacrifice. First, see, most people delay the beginning because they do not want to know how bad the situation is. This is deeply human. A person can carry debt for months or years while avoiding the exact balances, avoiding the rates, avoiding the statements, avoiding the total because vagueness is emotionally more comfortable than clarity. The source text used the example of a suspicious mole and a doctor. Visit, the illustration was crude but effective. People often avoid information not because ignorance is useful, but because uncertainty lets them postpone pain. Fay file site Fay turn 24, file 0 Fay I have always preferred exact pain to vague dread. Vague dread paralyzes, exact pain can be acted upon. So the first move is to drag the whole thing into the light. Every credit card, every line of credit, every personal loan, every student loan, every car note, every balance, every interest rate, every minimum payment, every due date, Put it all in one place. Do not beautify it. Do not dramatize it. Do not apologize for it. Just see it. I want people to understand something about this moment. The debt list is not there to shame you. It is there to end the fog. Most people do not actually have a money problem first. They have a visibility problem first. Once the balances are visible, the emotional chaos begins to lose some of its power. A problem with edges is less frightening than a problem with no shape. This is why I would never let a person skip the organization phase just because it feels uncomfortable. You do not get to conquer what you refuse to count. I would go even further. I would have that person calculate the total and the total minimum payment. Not because these numbers are pleasant, but because debt has a way of making itself feel smaller and more manageable as long as it stays fragmented. One card here, one loan there, one payment over there. Fragmentation helps denial. Totality creates seriousness. Now, once the debt is visible, many people think the next step is to attack it immediately with every available dollar. I do not. I think the next step is to preserve your ability to keep attacking it. That means building a tiny emergency buffer first. I know this offends the dramatic part of people's brains. They want to announce war on the balances that same day. I understand the urge, but if you throw every spare dollar at debt with nothing in reserve, then the next tire replacement, doctor visit, or appliance failure simply sends you back to the credit card. All you have done is run a loop. You paid the debt, life happened, and then you borrowed again. That is not progress. That is movement without escape. So I agree with the spirit of the reference document here. Keep at least a modest cash buffer. $1,000 is not a perfect number, but it is a useful minimum. For some lives, 1 month of essential expenses may be better. The precise threshold can vary. The principle should not. You need some cash between yourself and ordinary life. Otherwise, ordinary life will keep reenlisting you into debt. Fay Philosite Fay Turn 24 File 0 Fay. That buffer does not mean you are soft. It means you are strategic. This is one of the major differences between people who eventually become debt-free and people who keep circling the same balances for years. The successful ones stop thinking only in terms of aggression. They start thinking in terms of sustainability. They want a debt plan that can survive weather. And that brings me to the second word, sequence. People enjoy arguing about debt snowball versus debt avalanche because people like binary fights. In practice, both can work. The avalanche attacks the highest interest rate first. That is mathematically superior in pure efficiency. The snowball attacks the smallest balance first. That is psychologically superior for many people because it produces quick wins. I have no religious attachment to either method. I care about what the human being in front of me will actually continue doing once the novelty disappears. Math matters, psychology matters too. Anyone who pretends otherwise has never watched real people manage money. If you are the kind of person who can stare down a spreadsheet coldly and obey the mathematics without needing emotional reinforcement, then the avalanche is probably right for you. Eliminate the highest rate first, keep minimums on everything else, and save the extra interest over time. Fine. But most people are not machines. Most people need evidence that the effort is working. They need momentum. They need the satisfaction of seeing one balance vanish completely, then watching the payment that once served that debt become fuel. For the next one, there is a reason the snowball image works so well. Once it starts rolling, it becomes psychologically harder to stop. That matters. Fay Philosite Fay Turn 24 File 0 Fay. I have always believed that a good plan is not the plan with the most elegant logic. It is the plan that survives contact with human weakness. That is why I would usually rather see a person use the snowball consistently than worship the avalanche intellectually while never actually changing behavior. Because the true enemy is not an imperfect method. The true enemy is stalled action. However, I want to add something the source file only hinted at. Neither method works without spare cash flow. And spare cash flow must be found, not wished into existence. That is where most debt plans become real or die. You must know your net monthly income after taxes, not gross pay, not what the offer letter once said. Not what your salary sounds like at dinner. Take-home pay. That is the only number that can actually be allocated. Then you must know what leaves the household each month. Rent, utilities, insurance, groceries, transportation, minimum debt payments, personal care, entertainment, restaurants, shopping, subscriptions, the whole thing. The source document called this calculating your savings rate, income minus expenses. That is exactly right. Without that figure, all debt talk is theater. Fay fell aside. Fay turned 24, file 0 Fay. The late part of debt freedom is often glamorous in people's imagination. The beginning is not. The beginning is arithmetic. And arithmetic is humbling. This is the point where many people discover a painful truth. Their lifestyle is incompatible with their stated goal. They cannot keep eating out the same way, shopping the same way, traveling the same way, financing convenience the same way, while simultaneously claiming debt freedom is their top priority. One of those things is true. Often the other is a pleasant lie. I do not say that cruelly. I say it because debt freedom costs something, not forever, but for now. The reference file was right not to sugarcoat this. There must be a lifestyle change. If the goal is serious, no vacations funded carelessly. No luxury purchases justified with phrases like, I deserve this. Fewer dinners out, more meal prep, fewer impulse buys, more friction between desire and action. I would frame it a little differently than the original speaker did, but the substance is correct. Debt freedom is purchased by a temporary season of disciplined miserliness toward everything that does not matter, and disciplined generosity toward the future. Fay file aside, Fay turned 24, file 0 Fay. This is why I prefer the phrase temporary austerity in service of permanent flexibility, because that is what is really happening. You are not making your life smaller for no reason. You are making your obligations smaller so your future can become larger. A person who understands this feels less victimized by the process. He stops seeing each skipped restaurant bill as denial and starts seeing it as a transfer from a habit he barely values into a freedom he desperately values. That is a much stronger story to live inside. I want to linger on this because it is one of the deepest truths in personal finance. Human beings do not struggle only because the numbers are hard. They struggle because they narrate the numbers badly. If you tell yourself every sacrifice is a punishment, then the plan will feel cruel. If you tell yourself every sacrifice is buying back your own life, then the exact same action feels very different. No to dinner out becomes yes to future peace. No to random shopping becomes yes to sleeping. Well, no to one more finance comfort becomes yes to finally breaking the cycle. That is how you stay in the fight long enough to win. And then there is the final word, sacrifice. People dislike that word because it sounds moralistic. I do not use it morally. I use it economically. Every meaningful goal excludes some competing use of resources. That is all sacrifice means. If debt freedom is genuinely the priority, then lower priority spending must lose. It is as simple as that. The only question is whether you make those trade-offs consciously or unconsciously. Conscious sacrifice is strength. Unconscious sacrifice is regret. Here is what I mean. A person drowning in debt is already sacrificing. He is sacrificing future optionality. He is sacrificing peace. He is sacrificing credit flexibility. He is sacrificing the compounding he could have started if those payments were instead becoming investments. So when someone says, I do not want to sacrifice my lifestyle, I hear confusion. The sacrifice is already happening. The person is merely choosing the version that hurts later instead of the version that hurts now. I would rather accept the clean pain cut now. Change now, pay now, rebuild now, because the alternative is much uglier. The alternative is to normalize the payment, normalize the stress, normalize the idea that the beginning of every month belongs to the lender, normalize that home ownership or investing or saving or freedom must wait until some vague future when something magically improves. That is how people waste 10 years. I do not admire that. I admire the person who says enough, who organizes the balances, who saves the first protective 1,000, who chooses a sequence, who tracks the spending, honestly, who cuts the noise, who sends the surplus at the target, who keeps going when the novelty is gone. That person is not merely paying off debt. That person is changing identity. That may sound grand, but it is true. Someone who lives in debt long enough begins to structure thought around it. Payment dates become emotional events, purchases become morally loaded, goals become postponed automatically. The idea of freedom starts sounding luxurious instead of normal. Debt trains the mind to accept being owned in small monthly pieces. So when the debt starts dying, the mind must be retrained too. This is why visual reminders can help. As the original file suggested, a note on the fridge, a number on the wall, a progress tracker on the phone. These things are not childish, they are environmental cues. We use them in health, training, and behavior change for a reason. Human beings drift when the target is invisible. Make the target visible and behavior begins to organize around it more consistently. File-a-site, Fay turn 24, file 0 Fay. I think the better reminder, though, is not just the balance. It is the why. Peace of mind, a future home, a wedding without financial shame, a real emergency fund. A start to investing, the ability to open a statement and feel nothing but information, that is what debt freedom buys. And once a person really understands that, something fascinating happens. The sacrifice stops feeling endless because now the mind can see the exchange clearly: temporary restriction, permanent relief, temporary discipline, permanent flexibility, temporary embarrassment, maybe permanent dignity. I think dignity matters a great deal in money. Not status, not showing off, dignity. The dignity of knowing that the money you earn is increasingly yours to direct. The dignity of not being hounded by minimum payments. The dignity of planning a future instead of apologizing to it. The dignity of watching a debt balance finally hit zero. That is one of the most satisfying numbers in adult life. And yet, debt freedom is still not the final destination. It is the opening of the next chapter. This is another reason I encourage people to finish their debt plan with imagination. What comes next? If the debt disappears and you keep the same discipline, what now receives those dollars? Home savings, retirement contributions, brokerage investments, building a real cash reserve, funding a business, supporting family. Buying time debt freedom without a next assignment for the freed up cash can become vulnerable to relapse. The person feels relief, relaxes the structure, and slowly recreates the same habits that built the problem. I do not want that. I want the discipline to survive the debt, because that is when wealth building truly begins. This is one reason I think debt payoff teaches something much larger than debt payoff. It teaches sequencing, it teaches visibility, it teaches restraint, it teaches delayed gratification, it teaches the connection between small repeated choices and large eventual outcomes. Those are exactly the muscles needed for investing later. A person who has paid off debt seriously is often much better prepared to build wealth because he now understands that boring consistency beats emotional drama. That lesson is worth a fortune. If I had to reduce the whole thing to its essence, I would say this: do not start with calculators. Start with motive. Then face the whole list, then protect yourself with a small buffer, then choose a sequence you will actually obey. Then learn your cash flow with brutal honesty, then cut until the plan becomes real. Then keep going long after motivation disappears. And at every stage, remember what debt is really taking from you. Not only dollars, not only interest. It is taking peace. It is taking options. It is taking the first claim on your future. That is why this fight matters so much. You are not merely paying bills from the past. You are buying back the right to own more of what comes next. I think that is one of the noblest uses of discipline there is. And if you hold on to that idea firmly enough, then the process stops being a tutorial and becomes something more important. It becomes the moment you stop letting debt speak louder than your future.